Hi, Jason Knott, Chief Content Officer at Commercial Integrator, and today I am talking about software with Brad Dempsey, CEO of Solutions360. Hi, Brad.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
All right. For those who may not know, tell us a little bit about the history and the origin of Solutions360.
Well, we've been around since 1988. I actually started in the traditional computer business, actually in 1979, quite a while ago. I worked for some mini mainframe computer companies, CAD/CAM workstation company. My specialty was database. I did a lot of work with Oracle, Ingress, Informix, different software packages. And when I started the company, it was really a consulting company. And the idea was to help people with data. But what I found was I did an awful lot of work writing software, making different systems talk to each other. Everybody seemed to want this idea of unified information. While we were doing all that, I wrote some systems internally to just help us, because we were selling PC hardware and all sorts of things at that time, and created some software to automate our own business. Well, the customers who were receiving quotes on their fax machine back in those days were so impressed that they wanted to buy the software that we're making to service ourselves. So we released the first commercial package actually in 1993, and
Wow,
it's grown since then. Yeah.
Yeah, you're definitely one of the elder statesmen in the software space. That's for sure. So that experience, I think, comes in handy for a lot of integrators. So, what are some of the challenges that integrators are facing today when they're trying to run their businesses most efficiently and profitably?
Well, there's a lot of challenges for integrators, that's for sure. And they kind of fall, I think, into three categories. They're the traditional challenges we've seen for a long time. Margin erosion is always an issue. Labor is always an issue, not only attracting, but maintaining and keeping skilled labor. And of course, that's been exacerbated by the current conditions with COVID and everything else. But we're seeing some new things too. We're seeing cybersecurity becoming very important. We've had customers who have faced ransomware attacks. And one of them said to me just recently, he said, it's not a matter if, it's a matter when. We're all going to face this. It's just becoming such a huge business for cyber criminals.
Okay, so based on your experience, since 1993, obviously servicing the industry, what are some of the target ranges and what are some of the key performance indicators that an integrator should be looking at to examine his business?
It's a tough question to just give a specific answer about. A lot of them are more relative figures, so I'll try and kind of tackle it from that perspective. It's important to understand your gross margins. Now, the way each company measures its gross margins can be very different. It depends on what you put what's called above the line. What's important is that the ratio between your gross profit, which is the dollar value, as opposed to your gross margin, which is the percentage value, that covers your overhead. And that's a very important measurement. So what that ratio is, that OPEX ratio between what your gross profit is and what your overhead is very important. And that's what integrators really need to watch very carefully. Some other things are closing rates, and that really is dependent upon your business. If you're in a targeted market like nurse call, you may be closing 50% of your business. If you're more in a bid market, you may be closing 10%. So a lot of those ratios become relative, and that's where belonging to organizations like NSCA, et cetera, that publish some of those statistics and where you can talk to peers and see what they're facing can be very helpful.
Are you, when you come in and you start working with a new customer and you see some of those metrics, for example, and they might be, let's say, out of whack from what you're seeing from your other customers, is that something you can bring? You mentioned you started as a consulting business. Is that sort of a conversation you can bring to the customer and say, look, we need to really improve this and fix this. This is how the software is going to really help you because your number is not a good one.
Absolutely. And recently we actually have a consulting division now because we acquired Navigate Management Consulting, which has really bolstered our ability to provide that kind of guidance to customers. One of the first things we would look at, of course, is direct labor, because that's what you have the most control over. And we look at utilization and something we call billability. So you have a certain labor pool with a capacity. What's important is what percentage of that capacity can go to actually servicing revenue generating work. And that's one of the first key indicators we look for. For an installer, it may be a fairly high number because installers go out and they do a day's work at a time. So it might be 75% or better. But for a design engineer, it might be 50% is a good utilization factor.
Have those employee utilization percentages changed at all with the hybrid work environment, or have they actually gotten higher because we've maybe reduced some of the travel that's built into the budget?
Well, there are a lot of factors affecting it. I can't say that because of work from home or less travel, they've gone up. I think generally they've improved because the industry has to continue to get better. So we are seeing improvement throughout the industry.
That's good to hear. Okay, so let's talk specifically about Solutions 360. How does the software help that integrator improve his operations?
Well, most importantly, the software is just a foundation. Really, it's about the processes behind the software, the metrics, what you do with the information that comes out of the software. So it's a holistic approach. We have to look at the workflows and try and create an environment where we're collecting the information we need to collect without making it a big burden to get that information. And then if we use that information in our daily work, that feeds into our forecasting and planning, because in our belief, you shouldn't have to do any extra work to create that information to do proper planning and forecasting.
Give me a sense of some of the improvement percentages you've seen from customers who've adopted the software.
Well, our greatest success stories are companies that have grown and done acquisitions, and we've seen companies grow 4 or 5-fold. But it's not unusual for a customer, in the first year or two to see bottom line improvements of 5% or more.
Oh, fantastic. All right. We're in the midst of this supply chain situation, and I've talked to so many integrators who they can't finish the project. They can't get that final payment, those sorts of things. They've got how to create accounting line items for missing pieces of equipment. How can Solutions 360 help an integrator during this supply chain situation, especially when we're talking about inventory control and those sorts of things?
Well, the first word I would mention is planning, because the better you plan, the better you can react to those changes. I always like to talk about planning. The reason for planning being as much for the unexpected as it is for the work you expect to do, because when the unexpected happens, what is the impact and how can I adjust my business to deal with the impact of those changes? The better I plan, the better I can do that. Now, an important part of that, of course, is the cash forecasting, because with supply chain challenges, people are keeping more stuff on the shelves. They're tying up more of their cash and inventory because they want that stuff ready to go. And they may have projects that just need those extra couple pieces. They can't finish them. They can't finish billing them. So having a very strong 90-day cash flow forecast is extremely important in times like this.
Are you seeing integrators order more equipment earlier because they feel the need to, because they just know that they're not going to be able to do just-in-time inventory control anymore?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about another issue that I've heard debated out there from so many integrators, and that's cloud-based versus desktop-based software solutions. What are the pros and cons here?
Well, with on-prem, the desktop-based on-premise software, you have to build the infrastructure to support it. So that could include generators, extra air conditioning. You need a data center. Now, you could have a hybrid environment where you're renting data center space, but you're controlling the environment yourself. So there is something between cloud and on-prem. But another thing to remember about cloud is you have to be able to trust your cloud partner to make sure they're going to take care of your data. And one of the first things I would recommend people do is truly understand who owns that data, because there are some cloud providers out there, and we've seen it happen when we've done conversions, where the customer has an extremely difficult time just to get a dump of their data, which rightly they own.
All right, you talked earlier about how processes are so important and that the integrator really has to look at his processes and can't look at the software as really a panacea out there to whatever operational problems he might be having. What are some other pieces of advice for integrators in terms of how they need to adopt successfully and onboard successfully for software?
Well, first of all, don't call it just software. I mean, you're changing processes, you're changing culture in a lot of cases. So you have to attack it that way. You need buy-in. You need buy-in from the leadership of the company. That leadership has to convey the why. People need to understand why we're making these changes, and how it's going to affect me and where we're going. What's the longer term goal of those changes? So that alignment and that communication are, I think, are the most important parts of the entire software culture process change process.
Great advice out there. Brad Dempsey, CEO of Solutions360. Thanks for joining Commercial Integrator today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.